Oh, here we go. Uh, I'm Michael Naylor, and I am here in South Portland, Maine, home of the lobsters and the moose. And today I've got a lovely Type 9 Susie, who's in California, I believe. Sunny California. Well, not it's sort of dusty, smoky. Yeah. And she's going to tell us a little bit about her story and journey in the Type 9 atmosphere. So great to have you here.
I'm honored. Thank you. Be here.
Yeah. Yeah. And just keep the voice coming forward. If I notice you go into invisibility, I'll pull you back and say, come, give us your three energy, knock it out of the park, nice and loud and bold. So, how'd you find out and discover your nineness? I mean, what happened?
You're gonna laugh. I learned about it when I was asleep.
Like,
I Yeah, because I was in a dream actually. I had a friend who literally said you have to learn the Enneagram and took me to a cafe and mapped it out. And I had heard about it and was very, you know, kind of arrogant about it because I was in my master's program and I was studying the Myers-Briggs and I'm like, look, I don't have any time for that kind of stuff. But he said, you need to learn it. So he mapped it out for me and I kept trying to figure out who I was and what it meant. And then that night I had a dream that I was on a riverbed in Texas, of all things. I remember the mesquite wood. It was really one of those really clear.
wow.
And this being came up to me in a gray cloak. And the only reference I have is a Princess Bride one, which was the Holocaust cloak. And and the being said to me, because you're a 9, you're going to be able to help people identify who they are. And
So
so I woke.
he identified you in the dream.
Yeah.
Oh,
And um, it's odd to sort of like, say this happened in a dream, but I woke up in the morning and I was, kind of doing my own thing. And then all of a sudden it hit me, like as I was writing the dream down, like I was typed in a dream. And I couldn't figure out what I was. And my parents, who'd been involved in the Enneagram for some time, said, oh, you've got to be a 2, you've got to be a 2. And I never resonated with the 2. And so I read about the 9 and it was like a lightning bolt. It was really extraordinary. I was like, wow, this is me. And then a couple nights later, I had another dream that I was like, in fact, I woke up in the morning with my arms stretched out and my legs stretched out. And it felt like I was in that Leonardo da Vinci, painting. And I
uh-huh.
realized that we're all the Enneagram. This is the symbol of the Enneagram. So they were really powerful dreams. And I told a friend later who's quite the Enneagram expert. And he said, Susie, it makes me laugh that you're a 9 and you found it out when you were asleep, because 9s are really just asleep.
Well,
So
it's like you had a transmission. Carl Jung was, beaming down saying, look over here, 9. I mean, it just really received something from the deep unconscious. It's really interesting.
yeah, yeah, it was very helpful because I found it really hard to not identify with everything.
Yeah, yeah. So, when that whole lightning rod thing is certainly, I had something similar when I found out it was a 4. It was more like, oh my God. But so it wasn't, well, I wasn't very lit up. I was like, oh my God, this is bad news. Uh, but for you, like what then happened after that once you had that knowledge?
Well, I went from a person that was skeptical and kind of annoyed about the Enneagram to someone who went, oh, wow, I have to really learn this. Like, I have to understand it.
Mm,
And so after that, I started studying it. And I had a friend who said, look, why don't we just sit down and I'll tell you everything I know. So we sat in his bookstore for a long time, like years. And he gave me a nice download. And I started, working with it. I'm a psychotherapist. And I started working with it with my clients. And I really didn't tell them what I was doing. I was just sort of guessing about them. And they were just like, how did you know so much about me? Which I
Oh,
think is something that, as a tool, it's always really moving for people to be seen.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think in a way, helping people be seen is a way to kind of salve that inner wound I have of not being seen. And
yeah,
so it
yeah.
gave me more ways to do that.
Very powerful. That I've had the same experience. So often we call the the type 9 the peacemaker. That's
Mm,
one, or the mediator, um, the self-effacing, easygoing type,
mm,
uh, and you know at their best, having that sort of kind of gut compassion for the emotional, psychological space people inhabit, and being able to sort of touch in and feel it, but then sometimes lose contact with their own. Uh, so, self-effacing, easygoing peacemaker. How has that showed itself in your life? Is that something you resonate with, or do you have your own sort of definition that you've come to through your experiences?
Um, I don't have a definition, but the first time that I noticed how toxic that was, it was before I'd studied the Enneagram, but it's a really great kind of a story for me to cement the understanding of it. Which I was in a class and we were doing one of those, role plays where we were all in a lifeboat and we had to vote one person off the lifeboat. And so, being the good nine, I thought I'll just vote myself off because
Yeah,
if that's the right thing to do, and that we'll dialogue about it. But that's probably what everybody will do, but we'll dialogue about it. And so I voted myself off. And the weird thing is nobody else voted themselves off, but they voted me off because I didn't have any kids, right? And because I was the youngest, it was a mainly a group of women. And I it hit me at that point that no one in the boat advocated for my self-preservation, not even me. And that was really a sad moment for me to realize that I wouldn't even advocate for myself.
yeah,
And that later on really tied into this sad experience for mine, which is that it's like we've taken that sort of that fully love, beauty ideal of that platonic form of love and have distorted into I don't count in that equation. Like I'm supposed to love everybody else, but I have to sacrifice myself so no one's uncomfortable. And I think that's the saddest piece.
yeah. Yeah, and as nines have said to me, it's like it has a powerful gravitational pull inside of them to not be included, to erase myself, that somehow. And I've heard some say, part of it was when I was growing up as a kid, I was really sensitive to the suffering in the family, so I didn't want to add to it. So I hid out and I read books, or I went out in the woods, and because I care about the people I love and all of that. But as they've explained it, when they start to include themselves, they've often said it's like their inner critics going, "You will die if you do that. This is going to be death." So
Yes.
okay, and so I mean, how's that been for you?
Well, in fact, I figured out that I, had no self-preserving instinct to take care of myself. And
Yeah,
I think there's a counterforce that happens when you don't take care of yourself or when you don't do something, you don't express an emotion, that somehow life produces exaggeration coming at you. So I started really seeing that I was collecting psychopathic type of personalities, that shadow form of self-preservation.
yeah,
Um, so when I started to realize that I had to do things in my best interest, do things that were good for me, and start establishing that it was okay for me to take care of myself,
mm,
that type of personality retreated in my
yeah,
life.
yeah,
And nines, my sense is in systems theory, they say you have to have a dance of mutuality and individuality to order to have a very strong system. And I think nines think if I'm totally mutual, I'm participating in the system perfectly, but actually it makes the system fragile when you don't add yourself into it, right? It gets
Yeah.
less intelligent.
Yeah.
And that's taken me a long time to understand that actually people want to know what I think. People want to know how I feel. In fact, they feel like if I don't tell them, they are responsible for it, and it makes them angry, which I found really unusual. But
Oh, meaning that if you didn't let them know,
yeah,
then you would be mad at them for not finding out.
well, they are. I think the feedback I got is that if I say I don't want to, you know, make an opinion about where to go for dinner, you guys decide.
Yeah.
Then whoever decides holds the responsibility for other people's feelings about dinner. And so if you don't, if you don't say what you want, then other
Yes.
people have to feel resentful of the burden, right, of making the decision.
Yeah. That's a really nice addition to how that pattern affects people, where people start getting mad at the nine, like, tell me what you want. And I'm, you know, I can't tell, so I can't help you. And I'm feeling responsible. And, I'll get into all sorts of, uh, complex communications. But for you, what has helped you to start to come forward and be seen and letting yourself, speak on your own behalf? Like what kind of healing processes have you gone through that have really helped you?
Um, well, the most extreme was when I was in a divorce, and I learned that I wasn't doing anything self-preserving, and every time I felt like I was gonna try to do something like that, it felt like there was this huge counterforce from my ex-husband. How dare you? Until one day I realized that he was lying, and how much I had taken away my own intelligence to be supportive of him, right? But my instincts were telling me one thing, but I was overriding them because I was, you know, didn't want to first upset him, but also was to be loyal.
Yeah.
And I was doing it to such an extreme that he was going to take everything from me. And that was the biggest lesson, I think, with that. Um,
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting one because I know nines have said to me like that their gut instinct really gives them a lot of information, but they were so somehow habituated to not listening to it that it wasn't until they got clubbed over the head because they didn't listen to it or didn't know how to. Like, do I have permission to think non-peaceful thought toward this person who's being mean-spirited? I'm the peacemaker. Somehow I'm even responsible for their neuroses. And so anyway, it's been a really challenging, as nines have told me, to go, wow, I take if someone's not peaceful, somehow I blame myself, and as opposed to really sensing this person's not good for me. So does that resonate for you?
yeah, and it's when you talk about the invisibility cloak, the external one and the internal one, which is, I think, a great metaphor for that. The most poignant moment in my life was when um, I learned that I had an internal critic that I call the internal misogynist. That was like the big moment for me, that I had really, as a woman, completely denigrated myself inside. And as soon as I started dialoguing and firing that internal misogynist and saying, it's time to go, you're not being helpful, you can come back if you can only be positive, I did that. And then I had an interaction with my father where I confronted him. And it took me, I think, the strength to do it internally before it had impact on my father, right? But that passion to virtue experience, when I confronted my father, I thought I was going to die. I mean, I sort of laughed and said, I'm going to be disinherited, but it felt like I was going to die, right?
Yeah.
And I confronted him with his misogynistic attitude with my mother, and it changed his life. And that moment, I thought his life would not be changed if I had not gone inside and said what I thought.
Yeah.
So, because it changed his life, and literally he became a new human because of it,
Really?
I I got